Hey guys, today I'll show you a science fiction thriller TV series named The Twilight Zone, Season 2. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The first story begins with the man Phil, who is a picky guy with a psychological disorder, which has caused all his blind dates to end in failure. One day, while on another date, he suddenly hears a voice in his head. A woman named Annie has somehow connected with his brainwaves. The sensation is sudden and utterly surreal. Believing he's having an episode, Phil rushes to the bathroom. The two argue fiercely in his mind and eventually agree not to initiate contact again. The next day, driven by curiosity, Phil tries calling out to Annie, and to his surprise, she responds. Realizing the situation is worsening, Phil urgently seeks out his psychologist, who suggests he might have developed a multiple personality disorder. In the middle of their conversation, Annie reappears. But this time, instead of arguing, they find the interaction amusing. Phil even explains his current situation to Annie, and her sarcastic remarks intrigue him so much that he forgets to say goodbye. After several exchanges, they become friends. They frequently connect to watch games, share food, criticize TV shows, go for walks, and enjoy the scenery together. Their compatibility is uncanny, and their relationship naturally evolves into a romantic one. As the days go by, Phil's feelings for Annie deepen. He becomes eager to meet her sexy body and make their relationship official. Ignoring her warnings, he secretly searches for her online. The results show that she is a beautiful, charming woman who often wears black-framed glasses, but she's already married. This news hits Phil like a lightning bolt. He immediately connects with Annie to confront her, but she insists they never agreed to exclusivity. Phil feels deceived and, in his frustration, demands answers. Annie, equally upset, accuses Phil of looking her up online and taking things too seriously. Their heated exchange leaves them both confused and hurt. Eventually, Annie reveals that she is indeed married, but her marriage is unhappy, and she feels trapped by her husband. Phil's presence has brightened her otherwise bleak life, like a window opened by God. Moved by her honesty, Phil softens and they reconcile. Late at night, Phil, unable to sleep, calls out to Annie again. To his astonishment, she responds to his spoken words. Annie suggests that as long as he thinks of her, she can hear him. This sweet revelation leaves Phil ecstatic. Their conversations grow more philosophical and they find themselves falling deeper in love. For the first time in ages, Phil sleeps soundly, though he wakes up late for work the next day. However, instead of rushing to the office, Phil contacts Annie to share his joy. But Annie's response isn't as happy as he expected. She tells Phil that their relationship is too dangerous for her and they must end it immediately. Phil refuses and calls out to her in desperation, but Annie doesn't respond. Feeling used and heartbroken, Phil realizes what it means to be played hard to get. Discovering that Annie is ignoring him, Phil falls into despair. His appetite vanishes and life seems meaningless. Days blend into each other in a fog of sadness. One day, out of habit, he starts ranting about a TV show to Annie. After receiving no response for a long time, Phil finally snaps, shouting that he just wanted to be nice to her, but she treated him like a jerk. Immediately regretting his outburst, he apologizes and starts planning a trip to Annie's city, even looking up her home address, thinking that if she wouldn't come to him, he would come to her. But as he continues his search, Phil realizes that there are thousands of people named Annie in that city. Finding her would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. Frustrated, he slams his laptop shut. For life to continue, Phil turns his head and starts another round of blind dates. Faced with a beautiful date, Phil feels no interest at all. His behavior seems less impolite and more like he's a lunatic. Just then, a new hope appears. Annie finally reaches out to him. Annie says she is ready to start a new life, but she can't do it without him. Hearing this, Phil excitedly dances in TikTok style around the restaurant. Seizing the moment, Annie convinces him to come meet her at Pearson Bay, the midpoint between their cities. They set a time, and Phil immediately transforms himself from a mess into a well-groomed man, shedding his disheveled image. Then he boards the train to Pearson Bay. Throughout the journey, they chat happily, but their joy is short-lived. A terrifying message arrives, telling that Annie is being stalked by a creep. Phil is extremely worried but helpless, unable to be by her side. He can only keep comforting her. Suddenly, Annie tells him she plans to get off the train early at Kingwood Station to escape the stalker. Before he can ask for details, Annie says the stalker is following her. Phil urges Annie to seek help, but unfortunately there's no one around her. From Annie's subsequent words, he learns she first hid behind a Ferrari horse and then escaped into a crowded Christmas market. Just as she breathes a sigh of relief, thinking she's shaken off the stalker, a scream rings out, suggesting that the stalker has appeared and kidnapped her. Phil can no longer sit still. He urgently asks the conductor how long until they reach Kingwood Station. The conductor, seeing his agitation, warns him to calm down or be removed. Left with no choice, Phil returns to his seat and prays for Annie's safety. After an agonizingly long wait, Phil finally gets off the train. Following Annie's clues, he finds the horse statue and the Christmas market, but it's late and the market is deserted. Phil, like a headless chicken, stumbles around until he steps on something, Annie's black-framed glasses broken. Realizing the dire situation, Phil is devastated. Just then, he hears Annie's weak voice giving him a new clue. She's locked in a house where she can hear owls. Following this lead, Phil ventures into the forest and indeed finds a house. Peering inside, he sees someone within. With grim determination, Phil knocks on the door. A bearded man in a plaid shirt answers, looking concerned. He asks if Phil needs help. In a panic, Phil demands to know where Annie is. The man, sensing trouble, warns Phil to leave or he'll call the police. Afraid of a mistake, Phil asks Annie in his mind if her captor has a beard and wears a plaid shirt. Annie confirms, nailing the man's guilt. Phil attacks without hesitation. The man, caught off guard, becomes the victim of Phil's aggression. Remembering his beloved Annie, Phil's fury intensifies, and the man is knocked out. In a moment of clarity, Phil realizes his crime. As he hesitates, Annie's voice in his mind strengthens his resolve, and in a fit of rage, he kills the man. Just after the murder, a sleepy little girl appears looking for her father. Phil, filled with shame, horrifies the girl. At this moment, Annie's voice grows closer. She appears, seemingly unscathed, and embraces the girl. Phil, overjoyed, rushes to exchange greetings with her, but not hormones yet. But Annie, looking at Phil and her husband's corpse, questions him who he is and what he is doing here. Phil, thinking she doesn't recognize him, reintroduces himself, but Annie keeps retreating. Did Phil really find the wrong person? No, the twist is even more shocking. As Phil reaches out, Annie sends her daughter back to her room, then pulls out a knife, ready to confront him. Just then, the police burst in, shouting for Phil to freeze. Annie claims Phil broke into her home and killed her husband. Phil is arrested. Covered in blood, Annie's denial leaves him unable to explain. In the police car, Phil sits in silence, struggling to accept reality. He even wonders if he's truly insane, thinking Annie might be a figment of his split personality, leading him to murder. But then, Annie's voice thanks him for saving her and her daughter. Now she can finally start a new life. It turns out Phil was deceived. Annie was the real psychopath. Everything seemed to happen naturally, yet the details revealed deliberate malice. Annie, wanting to escape her current life, used her special ability to lure Phil, playing hard to get. She left clues, prepared the murder weapon, and preemptively called the police, setting a trap for Phil. Phil fell into Annie's self-redemption scheme. Beware of seemingly innocent yet cunning individuals. They might just be traps in disguise. The second story begins with an office lady, Michelle, seizing the opportunity to recommend herself and quickly becoming the manager of a luxury hotel. With her new position, promotion, and pay raise, she finally approaches the peak of her life after years of hard work. During her lunch break, she eagerly shares the good news with her husband. After putting down her phone, a sharp pain grips her heart. When she recovers, she notices everyone around her staring out the window in unison. Michelle rushes outside and sees a giant spherical object floating in the sky. A loud noise follows, and people start bidding farewell before staring at the object, becoming motionless like robots losing power. The unknown danger prompts Michelle to flee. She runs through streets and alleys, finding the entire city in a paused state. Whether it's elderly women or police officers, they all tell her that the world system is undergoing maintenance and everyone needs to go offline temporarily. Hearing this, Michelle feels abandoned by the world, as if she's the only one unaware of what's happening. When she finally gets home, she finds her husband safe and sound. She frantically tells him about the strange occurrences outside, but to her surprise, her husband isn't alarmed. Instead, he asks if she has forgotten the offline reminder symbol. When this symbol appears, it indicates potential anomalies in the world, but it's all prearranged and will resolve upon waking up. The husband goes downstairs to check the symbol, but then he suddenly tells Michelle that his name isn't her husband. The man says he'll contact someone to help her and then becomes motionless, staring at the offline symbol. Feeling the urgency to leave, Michelle runs back into her house. Through the door's glass, she sees a few people approaching, claiming to be customer service personnel there to diagnose her issues. Michelle, knowing nothing about them, is very cautious. The customer service team finds the situation frustrating, noting they've never encountered such a case before. To calm her down, one of them uses a keyword to disarm her knife. They lead Michelle to the living room and turn on the TV, where the true nature of their world is explained. They are in a virtual world called Dreamland, where players connect to the game during their sleep to experience different lives. As morning approaches, the offline reminder symbol, the giant sphere, signals them to wake up and return to their real lives. The customer service personnel inform Michelle that in reality, she is a man named Phineas. Her character, Michelle, is entirely self-created by the man. She doesn't remember anything because Phineas suffered a heart attack and synchronized with the game one last time before falling unconscious. Though hospitalized and treated, his consciousness remains trapped in the game, unable to wake up. To wake Phineas, they must forcibly terminate the game by having Michelle look at the offline symbol. Michelle is shocked and finds it hard to believe her world is fake. Just as she reaches the peak of her life, a group of people tells her to wake up and stop dreaming, which she can't accept. She questions the customer service team, asking if everything will return to normal once the offline time ends. Seeing her distress, the team softens their approach and calls in Ellen, Phineas's wife of many years and his emergency contact in the game. Even seeing Ellen, Michelle doesn't regain her memory. The customer service team suggests a forced termination, but Ellen finds this inhumane and refuses. She decides to take Michelle for a talk. With 20 minutes left until offline time ends, they go to a park. Ellen tells Michelle that upon learning Phineas's game was still synchronizing, she decided to find Michelle. Seeing her, Ellen understands why her husband created Michelle, because she possesses qualities Phineas lacks but always desired. They talk about their courtship and family life, with Ellen reminiscing rather than helping Michelle regain her memory. Finally, Ellen tells Michelle that if her virtual character doesn't disappear before offline time ends, Phineas will die in real life. Although Ellen is reluctant, she respects Michelle's decision. Michelle decides to return to the real world with Ellen. They look at the giant sphere together, and as Ellen counts down, she successfully logs out. Michelle hesitates at the last moment. The customer service team senses her fleeing and starts a pursuit. Michelle hides in the top-floor room of the hotel. Just as she thinks she's safe, a bird reveals her location, and the customer service team surrounds her. With 3 minutes left, a bearded man appears out of nowhere. He is a high-level customer service agent, triggered by special circumstances in the game. He isn't there to capture Michelle, but to have her sign a waiver. Moments earlier, Phineas's physical body had died due to a self-induced heart attack caused by taking sleeping pills. In his final moments, he synchronized with the game, essentially choosing to stay in the virtual world forever. By signing the waiver, Michelle gains her freedom, knowing she has no real place to return to since Phineas is gone. She can continue to run the hotel and live normally within the game. Finally, Michelle signs the waiver. Now she faces two choices: live forever in the virtual world, knowing it's fake, or choose to log out and face whatever comes next. She bluntly asks what happens if she doesn't want to play anymore, but the high-level agent has already left. The only response is the countdown to offline time ending. After much struggle, Michelle faces the giant sphere as the countdown ends and it disappears, restoring normalcy to the virtual world. Eventually, Michelle chooses not to leave and continues running the hotel. The hotel becomes the best place for Ellen to visit when she misses her husband. The film concludes with a profound question. Though life in the real world holds significant importance, does that mean a life in the virtual world isn't life at all? When dreams and reality completely diverge and one's desires are at odds, where should the balance lie? Phineas, disenchanted with his real-life circumstances, found meaning and purpose in the virtual world. Consequently, he chose to end his physical life and continue living as Michelle, fully aware that it was an illusion. The third story begins with a man named Harry, who believed he was talented since he graduated from a prestigious acting school, and as a result, he was always picky about scripts and roles. This approach led him into middle age without even landing bit parts. His life was in dire straits. One day, unable to pay the electricity bill, his girlfriend finally exploded. In her eyes, this man always thought he deserved everything. She couldn't stand his selfishness any longer and decided to break up. To make quick money, Harry decided to rob a bank. Just as he locked eyes with the teller, their souls swapped, much to their surprise. They stared at each other in disbelief. Before Harry could react, his body was tackled to the ground and arrested. Occupying the teller's body, Harry looked at the unfamiliar hands in horror, but also felt a strange sense of delight. Taking advantage of the chaos, she grabbed the bag of cash and headed for the back door. Just as she reached the door, a colleague appeared, catching her plan to steal the money. In the bank's main hall, staff were checking on the unconscious Harry. Officer Peter, annoyed by a call from his girlfriend, hung up and asked about the location of his partner, Officer Luntz's. Luntz was approaching the back door, hearing the commotion. He immediately assessed the situation and informed Peter that the teller had tried to steal money. Luntz followed protocol, intending to arrest the teller. When they locked eyes, Harry transferred into Luntz's body. This time it worked. The teller's soul returned to her body, and Luntz's soul entered Harry's body. Essentially, whenever Harry entered a new body, the displaced soul would enter his body, and the previously displaced soul would return to its original body. Harry, now in Luntz's body, quickly called his girlfriend. He wanted to tell her they had money, but when she heard a stranger claiming to be Harry, the girlfriend thought it was a pervert and hung up. Though Harry had the money, he was now homeless. The police retrieved Harry's identity information. Hearing his colleague's words, Peter's expression became subtle. He glanced at the interrogation room where Luntz, in Harry's body, was detained. Luntz insisted he wasn't Harry. To the police, Harry had attempted robbery, gone mad, and Luntz had fled with the money. They suspected the two were accomplices. To uncover the truth, Peter began interrogating Harry. Luntz told Peter that his consciousness blacked out the moment he locked eyes with the teller. When he woke up, he found himself in the robber's body. Peter thought he was lying and was very firm until Luntz revealed a secret only they knew. Peter, spooked, turned off the recorder. Meanwhile, the real Harry went to a cafe. Before he could order, the police found him. He threw the money bag behind the counter and transferred into a barista's body. The police soon found the money bag. In his new body, Harry grabbed the money and ran. He fled until he was exhausted and then transferred into an athletic man. The scene shifts to the officer interrogating the bank teller. Despite Peter's persistent questioning, the teller's answers are almost identical to what Harry had said. At that moment, a police officer interrupts them, saying that Luntz has been found, but he's incoherent, claiming he spent the entire morning talking to Peter. Now things are getting interesting. Peter, deep in thought, realizes that after this possession, Harry's soul must be in the athlete's body. Luntz and the barista's souls have returned to their own bodies. Hence, the person in Harry's body now is the athlete. Realizing this, Peter rushes back to the interrogation room. As expected, the athlete is on the verge of a breakdown. Meanwhile, Harry, in his own body, changes his attire, intending to explain the situation to his girlfriend. Just as he exits the clothing store, a sign catches his eye, telling one to find his true self. He realizes it's a psychic shop. He is about to enter when a passerby warns him that the shop is a scam. Harry is about to leave when he spots a police car approaching. In a panic, he ducks into the shop. The psychic comes out and says he sees Harry as pretending to be someone else and asks him if he knows who he really is. Though the psychic is a fraud, his words hit close to home for Harry. Harry then recounts his bizarre experiences to the psychic. While speaking, he notices a blue teddy bear through a skylight in a window of the adjacent building. The psychic, intrigued by Harry's story, decides to test its truth by making eye contact with Harry, and surprisingly, it works. Back at the police station, Officer Peter calms the athlete down and proceeds with the investigation. Midway through the athlete's statement, his soul is replaced. The psychic wakes up in Harry's body, facing a bewildered Peter. Peter, accustomed to such occurrences, quickly asks who he is. Through Peter, the psychic learns that the person currently in his shop is the wanted robber. Sensing danger, the psychic tries to give the police his location, but before he can finish, Harry switches back and the athlete returns. However, the athlete remembers the shop's address. Back in his body, the psychic feels a chill running down through his spine to his butt, realizing Harry is much worse than he is. While the psychic scams people for money, at least he does it with their willing participation. Harry is livid, furious that his body has been arrested. The psychic, seeing Harry's stubbornness, urges him to reform and not to point a gun at people for money since they're living beings. But now Harry sees everyone as just a shell to swap at will. Harry ignores his advice and the psychic kicks Harry out, fearing he might get dragged into more trouble. As the door slams shut, Harry suddenly remembers that his money bag is still inside. Despite his shouting, there's no response. Harry waits outside until evening and even calls the police for help. When questioned by the police, he stammers like a drunk, insisting on retrieving the bag without revealing its contents. Just then, the officers receive a notification about Harry's case. They glance back at him silently. The ensuing foolishness left everyone stunned. Despite the clear suspicion, the officers didn't arrest him immediately, but instead politely asked for his name. Realizing he's been exposed, Harry starts switching bodies with people on the street, eventually landing in an elderly man's body to evade capture. The old man's poor health leaves Harry struggling. Just then, a neighbor with a child greets him. Seeing the child, a new plan forms in Harry's mind. If he can find out the old man's address, he'll have a place to hide at night. During the conversation, Harry notices the boy holding a blue teddy bear, the same one he saw earlier in the psychic shop. This means the boy's room is close to the shop. Harry decides to possess the boy and sneak into the shop at night to retrieve his money bag. Following through, the boy's terrified cries for his mother in the police car contrast with Harry's successful entry into the shop. However, before he can find the bag, Peter arrives with the boy. A brief exchange reveals to Harry that escape is impossible. Pretending to switch back to the boy, Harry suddenly shifts his focus to Officer Peter. The situation turns dire as Harry gains the upper hand. Fearing for his life, Peter tries to reason with him and seizes the opportunity to take Harry's gun, forcing him to switch back. As they struggle, backup arrives. In the ensuing chaos, the backup officers, adhering to a shoot-first policy, fail to hear the real Peter's explanation and tragically shoot him, making Peter an innocent victim. The next day, in Peter's body, Harry goes home to explain the situation to his girlfriend. To his surprise, as soon as he opens the door, she doesn't hold back at all. They go inside, and the girl wraps herself around Peter. She tells him that Harry has disappeared, and she doesn't want to wait any longer. She wants to officially be with Peter. It turns out the girl and Peter have known each other for a while. The call Peter received earlier was from the same girl. What Luntz meant by Peter's hidden secret was also this affair. Ordinarily, Harry would be furious upon hearing this, but he remains unexpectedly calm and silently tells himself to forget about being Harry. With his new identity, Harry goes for another audition. This time, he gets the part on the first try. When the director praises him, Harry responds with a profound statement, saying he likes to let various roles wear his skin, like changing bathrobes. He's just expressing himself. The story ends with the message that losing oneself is ultimately just a shell. From a perspective, Harry's auditions always failed because he couldn't immerse himself in the roles. So, fate gave him a chance to experience life from another's perspective, to teach him how to act. From another perspective, this story might tell a scheme. Harry's girlfriend knew long ago that her boyfriend had the ability to swap souls. Now that Harry's body is no longer useful, she seduces Peter in secret, selecting a new body for her boyfriend. So, when Harry, with Peter's face, returns home and sees his girlfriend embrace him, he doesn't explode in rage because he finally remembers who he really is. The fourth story begins with a famous singer, unable to bear the pressure of being adored by millions, choosing to end her life in a car crash. Before she dies, she gives a coin to a street performer named Jasmine, who idolizes her. Jasmine has grand musical dreams, but has had no luck. No one is willing to listen to her. After the incident, she returns home feeling dejected, only to hear her father complaining about her to her sister as soon as she enters. Jasmine's sister Zara is a top heart surgeon. While everyone else doesn't support Jasmine's pursuit of her dreams, Zara steadfastly believes in her sister. Their father is worried about Jasmine, thinking she should at least get a proper job, as only vagrants sing on the streets. Hearing this, Jasmine storms back to her room in anger and channels her frustration into writing songs. The next day, Jasmine attends the famous singer's memorial service. She leaves a handwritten letter and then picks up her guitar to honor her idol with a song. Unexpectedly, her singing causes quite a stir. Perhaps becoming famous at the memorial service, Jasmine gradually gains fans. More and more people come to watch her perform on the streets, and her income rises significantly. Even the host of the talent show Applause invites her to compete. That night, Jasmine looks at the coin, deep in thought. Perhaps it brought her luck. With a mix of nervousness and excitement, Jasmine accepts the invitation. The show's format involves contestants singing on stage, while the audience's applause drives a decibel meter to determine the singer's popularity. As soon as Jasmine starts singing, she captivates everyone. She hasn't even sung a few lines before the decibel meter maxes out. Thus, she advances smoothly. Thanks to the show, Jasmine starts to gain fame. She becomes so popular that people recognize her even while jogging in the park. When she stops to buy a hot dog, the vendor, a big fan, refuses to charge her. Enthusiastic fans gather around for photos and to cheer her on. In this atmosphere of adulation, Jasmine begins to abandon her original style, focusing more on fashion. She completely ignores Zara's well-meaning advice. For some reason, as Jasmine becomes more famous, the atmosphere between the sisters becomes subtly strained. Zara thinks Jasmine has lost herself and become arrogant, while Jasmine believes Zara's words are laced with jealousy. So, on the night of the final, she refuses to let her sister come to support her. Perhaps affected by her emotions, Jasmine makes a significant mistake during her performance. Just when she's sweating nervously, thinking she's about to be eliminated, thunderous applause erupts from the audience. Jasmine wins the championship even before she sings the chorus. From obscurity to the limelight, it only took one night. Those friends who had long been forgotten in Jasmine's contacts list sent her congratulations early the next morning. Jasmine was awakened by the noise and felt dazed as she read the messages, but soon she was drawn to the cheers coming from outside her window. Pulling back the curtains, she saw a crowd of loyal fans who had been there all night. Seeing this, Jasmine felt a mix of emotions. Something didn't feel right. Over breakfast, she told Zara about the final the previous night. Jasmine believed that all her newfound luck and the brainless adoration of her fans came from the coin the dead singer had given her. It was just too strange. Zara, however, thought Jasmine was overthinking it. Winning a national singing competition and being adored by the public was perfectly normal. After all, they were sisters, and Jasmine trusted Zara's words. From that day on, Jasmine truly believed in her own talent. The benefits of her newfound fame followed. New song releases, bus advertisements, and wherever she went, fans would recognize and surround her. Initially, she enjoyed this honor, but gradually the fans became crazier, even affecting her daily life. It wasn't until she was mobbed by fans in a park that she became scared. Zara noticed her worry and advised her to get rid of the coin, but Jasmine didn't want to return to the uncertain life of street performing. She decided to keep the coin. One day, Jasmine appeared on a talk show. Before she even spoke, the audience began clapping uncontrollably, so loudly that the host couldn't be heard. As the situation spiraled out of control, Jasmine couldn't stand it any longer and fled the stage. Halfway home, the driver turned on the radio, which was playing her hit song. Jasmine felt nauseated and asked the driver to turn it off. However, the driver, also a crazed fan, let go of the steering wheel to applaud her, nearly causing an accident. Terrified, Jasmine ran to the hospital to find her sister. Zara was in the middle of heart surgery, but even the operating room was playing Jasmine's song. Seeing Jasmine, all the doctors dropped their instruments and began to cheer. Even the unconscious patient was somehow clapping. Zara finally believed Jasmine's words. The coin was indeed cursed. To prevent further disaster, Zara took Jasmine to the river and, after much persuasion, Jasmine handed over the coin, which Zara then threw into the water. From that point on, Jasmine stayed in a lakeside cabin to lay low. The peaceful environment finally brought her some freedom. This tranquility lasted until she received a magazine filled with negative news about her disappearance. Jasmine felt disheartened, as her previous fame now seemed like a distant dream. Later, another magazine arrived, and Jasmine ran out to check it, only to find no mention of her. Instead, the cover featured a new rising star. Flipping through the magazine, Jasmine grew increasingly angry. The fame and fortune that once belonged to her were gone. She realized she had lost everything and became mentally unstable. She tried to calm down, but jealousy and resentment consumed her. She even dreamed about regaining her fame. One rainy morning, she made a terrible decision. She would take back what was hers. The next day, Jasmine packed her bags and returned to the park where she used to perform. Without the coin's luck, passers-by mocked her, and even the talent show host pretended not to know her. Seeing the latest singer's ad on a passing bus, Jasmine's expression darkened. That night, she attended the new singer's signing event, which was packed with fans. Taking advantage of the chaos, she slipped through the crowd and pulled out a knife. Seizing the moment, she lunged like a predator and stabbed the female singer in the back. Jasmine laughed maniacally, feeling she had finally gotten her revenge. But when the singer turned around, revealing her face, Jasmine's laughter stopped abruptly. All her previous anger and sense of injustice now seemed ridiculous. The person who had taken everything from her was her sister Zara. It turns out, to achieve fame like Jasmine, Zara had kept the coin instead of throwing it into the river. She had abandoned her promising career as a heart surgeon to use the coin's luck to enter the entertainment industry. The irony was too much. Jasmine struggled to save her sister, but as the attacker, she was restrained. In her final moments, Zara's hand opened, revealing the coin. The fans in the audience applauded and cheered as if witnessing a spectacle. In this story, the coin represents the good luck everyone desires. With its halo, wrong becomes right, and without it, right becomes wrong. Many are easily blinded by the success that luck brings, but luck does not equal ability. When virtue does not match position, downfall is inevitable. The fifth story begins with an upcoming school's Science and Technology Expo. Starting tomorrow, new student Irene has to prepare her project on mental abilities research. To put it simply, she's exploring whether humans possess supernatural powers. New students are often bullied. As soon as Irene sat down, the class troublemakers targeted her, teasing her and throwing paper balls. The bully girl Madison even threw a pencil at her head. Irene, new and unfamiliar with the environment, chose to endure it silently. However, in a corner, the pencil that hit her head turned to dust. Back in her dorm, Irene grew increasingly depressed. She approached her teacher to request a change in her research topic, but all the project slots were taken. She had no choice but to continue. The next day, Irene's research test began. She randomly selected cards and stared at them, while her classmates tried to guess the answers through mind reading and circled their guesses on a form. From the test results, Irene's attention focused on Madison, the very person who had bullied her. In a normal test, even random guesses would get at least 5 answers correct, but Madison got them all wrong. She might have guessed all the correct answers and deliberately chose wrong ones to mock Irene. Realizing this, Irene approached Madison, but Madison thought she was weird and shut her out. Clinging to a glimmer of hope, Irene left a set of test cards at Madison's dorm room door before leaving. Later that evening, after sending off her friends, Madison noticed the cards. Reflecting on what Irene had said, she became curious. Back in her room, Madison started testing herself. What she thought was a silly prank turned out to be something unexpected. She got every card right, causing her to think maybe Irene was telling the truth and she indeed has some special abilities. Unable to sit still, Madison met Irene the next day in an abandoned restroom to confront her about what she had done. Irene, seeing Madison's aggressive stance, hastily swore she wasn't lying. Madison did have supernatural powers, but neither of them knew how many abilities she possessed or how to use them. Determined to figure it out, they decided to use the restroom as their testing ground, meeting there after school each day. They tested various abilities like mind reading, summoning, dowsing, telekinesis, and precognition. Soon, their research showed initial results. Madison could proficiently use mind reading. For instance, one day she used it to make a student give up their cafeteria seat by learning their name and threatening them with their stepfather's scandal. At that moment, everyone seemed naked and transparent to her. Gradually, Irene and Madison became close friends. One night, after finishing their tests and returning to the dorm, Irene asked if Madison had discovered the hidden restroom through her powers. Madison, happy to share secrets with her friend, explained that they used to meet on the rooftop until the school changed the locks. While looking for a new secret spot, they stumbled upon the abandoned restroom. Just as she finished speaking, a bright light shone on them, caught by the dorm supervisor who threatened to write them up. Madison refused, having read the supervisor's mind and knowing about her gambling with embezzled funds. Madison threatened to expose her unless she let them off and handed over the rooftop keys. Terrified and caught off guard, the supervisor had no choice but to let them go as she didn't have the keys with her. Laughing and chatting, they headed back to their room when a metallic clink caught their attention. The rooftop key had appeared. Madison had unknowingly learned summoning. They quickly called their friends to the rooftop for a drink. But a strange thing happened. After opening the door, the key turned to dust, just like the pencil. It became clear that anything Madison summoned would only exist for its intended purpose and then disappear. To use it again, she would have to summon it anew. Late one night, a group of girls sneaked up to the rooftop. Their conversation revolved around their rebellious exploits, each more outrageous than the last. Inevitably, their attention turned to Irene, the new girl. Irene, eager to fit in, quickly boasted that she had done similar things. Trying to prove herself, she lit a cigarette like the others but ended up coughing violently. Seeing Irene struggling, Madison felt a pang of sympathy and suggested they call it a night. However, the group wasn't ready to let Irene off the hook. Emboldened, Irene started to take off her clothes, trying to impress them. This made Madison genuinely angry. Using her mind-reading ability, she began to reveal everyone's secrets, causing an uproar. In the chaos, Irene tried to climb back onto the rooftop, but lost her grip and fell. Everyone panicked, fearing the worst, and the group quickly fled for their shitty lives. Only Madison stayed behind to check on Irene, finding her miraculously unharmed. Somehow, Madison had revived her, but their friendship was never the same after that night. Irene grew closer to the troublemakers, neglecting the research sessions she had promised to Madison. Feeling abandoned, Madison went to find Irene, only to discover her being photographed nude by the group. Madison brought a drunken Irene back to their room, warning her against hanging out with those girls. Irene, however, mistook Madison's concern for jealousy and lashed out. Furious, Madison ended their friendship. Soon, the day of the Science and Technology Expo arrived, a day that turned into Irene's public humiliation. Her project was deemed unfit for display, and worse, the troublemakers had uploaded her nude photos to the exhibition screens. As more people gathered to watch, Irene broke down in tears. In a moment of intense emotion, she screamed in a chicken voice, causing the screens to shatter, and the troublemakers collapsed, dead as pieces of soap. Madison confronted Irene afterward, accusing her of manipulating her. Madison realized that Irene was the one with supernatural powers, not her. She believed Irene had used her abilities to become popular. Enraged, Irene countered, insisting that she had always considered Madison her true friend. She argued that Madison's loneliness and pain stemmed from her refusal to accept her uniqueness and her inability to see Irene as a friend. Amidst their heated argument, they finally acknowledged their true feelings for each other, but their fragile reconciliation was short-lived. Suddenly, Irene turned to ash and vanished without a trace of her smell. A few days later, Madison made a new friend. The story ends with a poignant line. "You came to this world once. You must see the sun." Madison's heart remained confused. In her quest for fulfillment, she had unknowingly built a utopia within her mind. This world, a projection of Madison's psyche, responded to her desires and fears. Here, she was a rebellious girl with a gang of friends, a structured school, and strict teachers. Yet she remained trapped in a mental prison, crying out for help. She wanted a true friend, and Irene appeared. Fearing to lose her, Irene grew closer to the other girls, picking up bad habits and falling from grace. As Irene's despair grew, Madison's world began to crumble. The friends were fake, the secret hideouts were fake, and even the school was fake. Madison could see through everything, but nothing truly belonged to her. Ultimately, she was just a lonely soul. The sixth story begins with researchers from the US, Canada, and China conducting a joint investigation into the ice loss in Antarctica. Preliminary results indicate that the melting edges of the ice sheets are allowing sunlight to penetrate the subsurface ocean, leading to an increase in underwater marine life. This, in turn, causes deep-sea predators to migrate in search of food, setting the stage for the story. Despite the official appearance, everyone has their own hidden agendas. The U.S. team aims to discover a rare substance found only in deep-sea creatures, ostensibly to research life-saving medicines. The scene shifts to the dive hole at the research station. 2 investigators had gone underwater for samples but hadn't returned. Another member was monitoring from the shore. Suddenly, investigator Casper emerged, struggling, his leg caught on something. The girl rushed to help, but in the struggle, Casper was gruesomely injured, and the girl was also pulled underwater, becoming another victim. The blood-stained water eventually calmed, but strange sounds followed, and a trail of slime appeared on the ground. Something had entered the sample box. Sensing something was wrong, investigator Orson came to investigate and realized there was trouble. The professional diver prepared to dive in and search for the missing team members, but the sample box caught everyone's attention. Orson cautiously opened it to reveal a giant octopus weighing about 40 kilograms. They weren't sure if the octopus was responsible for the deaths, but it seemed to be a new species they were looking for, so they brought it back to the lab for study. Meanwhile, the diver dived to search for the missing. Orson and his teammate Channing stayed by the dive hole waiting for news. While they were busy, Channing whispered to Orson, expressing suspicion that the observer Ling might know about their plans since she was the Chinese representative and should be watched closely. Just then, the diver resurfaced with Casper's body, marked with suction cup wounds. The diver explained that Casper had become trapped under the ice, his oxygen mask torn off, leading to his drowning. 2 investigators were still missing, likely dead. The team's attention shifted to the octopus. The mechanic confidently asserted that the octopus was responsible, as these creatures have existed for millions of years, making them perfectly capable of killing a human effortlessly. The situation becomes dangerous. Orson suggested halting the investigation until they could connect to the satellite and call for a rescue team to recover the bodies. At that moment, Ling made a new discovery. The octopus's radula wasn't made of chitin, but a much harder substance. This confirmed it was indeed the new species they were searching for. Upon hearing this, the diver, visibly frustrated, pointed out that this octopus had just killed their colleagues. Whether it was a new species or not, he wanted it dead. As if understanding human speech, the octopus sprayed water at the light, causing a burst of sparks and a short circuit, plunging them into darkness. The mechanic stayed behind to fix the light and keep an eye on the octopus, while the diver took the body to be preserved. Channing and Orson went to fill out the rescue request forms. During this break, Orson took Channing aside, suggesting that if they could secure the octopus, the U.S. could develop new medicine. They could report this discovery first when they connected to the satellite. Unbeknownst to them, Channing had left her phone in the lab, and the translation system was still on. Ling had heard every word. As Channing typed out her message, switching screens to keep an eye on Ling, Ling quietly took Channing's phone back to her room to eavesdrop further. Meanwhile, the mechanic, fixing the light and listening to music, instinctively glanced back at the octopus in the tank. As the saying goes, when you gaze into the abyss gazes back at you. The mechanic returned to his work, unaware that the clever octopus had escaped the tank, camouflaged itself, and was slowly approaching him. Elsewhere, the diver grew increasingly angry as he looked at the bloodstains. He was determined to kill the octopus, but upon entering, he found the mechanic already dead as shit, with wounds similar to those on Casper's face. Before he could call for help, a GPS tentacle wrapped around his neck, and after a brutal struggle, the diver was killed and sent to meet Sea Satan. The octopus had executed a silent double murder with its high intelligence, and the lab remained unaware of the events. Turning to Ling, she learned through eavesdropping that the satellite connection would be available in a few minutes. She hurried to upload the octopus's photos. It was a race against time. Just then, Channing needed an authorization code to upload her information, which was on her phone. She went to the lab to retrieve it, only to stumble upon the crime scene. Orson and Ling, hearing the commotion, rushed to check. Ling left her room hastily, not closing the door or lowering the phone's volume. When she spoke in the lab, the translation system's voice was heard by Channing, who followed the sound to Ling's room. There, she discovered the eavesdropping and the open vent, indicating the octopus had escaped. Channing quickly informed Orson. Ling, unfazed by the discovery of her intentions, confessed that she had known about the U.S. mission for 3 months before arriving. Just then, they realized the octopus had stolen their electronic devices. Suddenly, all the screens began displaying Ling's computer desktop. Incredibly, the octopus had learned to use the phone and computer within 3 hours of being out of the ocean. Ling's research was now exposed. She was studying how to modify humans using animal genes. Realizing their mistake, they decided to abort the mission and release the octopus. However, the octopus wasn't ready to let them go. It had stolen human genes from the research station and altered its own genetic sequence. This meant the octopus was about to achieve what evolution had not completed in 700 million years, the rise of marine creatures to eradicate land-dwelling beings, thereby ending humanity. The 7th story begins with a couple, Robert and Barbara, feeling immense guilt after their daughter Maggie killed herself by poisoning. The couple decided to move away from the place filled with sorrow. As they were packing their bags, a news broadcast came on the radio. A cosmic flare was expected to pass through Earth this afternoon. Just as the announcement finished, a bright light flashed, and suddenly the power went out and their phones lost connection to the network. At that moment, strange noises came from the basement. Sensing something was wrong, the couple cautiously went to investigate. What they saw was beyond anything they had ever imagined. An ugly alien worm was gnawing on a wooden crate. Panicked, they hid in the closet. While Robert was contemplating their next move, Barbara made a bold statement. She believed that the creature wasn't a monster, but their deceased daughter returned. She had seen eyes that were identical to Maggie's. Robert, knowing his wife was still in denial about their daughter's death, tried to bring her back to reality. He argued that the creature was likely a monster brought by the cosmic flare and they should call the police for help. However, Barbara, deep in her grief, was convinced it was Maggie. To change her mind, they decided to return to the basement. They found the alien in a secluded corner. It seemed to have understood their thoughts and, incredibly, called Barbara Mom, even transforming into Maggie's likeness. The couple was stunned, but the illusion didn't last long due to the alien's lack of energy on Earth. Its face fell apart, shocking Robert, who injured his wrist in the chaos. They hurried upstairs, only to have the alien reappear in front of them, having passed through the floor. With no other options, they hid in the bathroom, blocking the door with towels. The alien could pass through floors, but not doors. After a moment of calm, the couple began to strategize. Barbara still believed it was their daughter. Even if it wasn't real, she was happy to see her. But Robert saw this as a danger, arguing that the alien was mimicking their daughter to deceive them, a tactic used by predators. Then a knock at the door and Maggie's voice came through, asking why her parents had locked her out and ignored her. As Barbara started to waver again, Robert urged her to stay focused. They couldn't let the monster in. The alien, sensing their hesitation, intensified its act, even mimicking Maggie's last thoughts before her death. Its performance was so convincing that only the sound could win an Oscar. Barbara, desperate in her grief, opened the door. The alien had completely transformed into Maggie. Seeing their lifelike daughter, Barbara lost all sense of reality. She took the alien to the living room and cared for it, criticizing Robert for being cold-hearted. When she returned with Maggie's favorite cookies, the alien had vanished. Robert rushed to the basement where he found traces of alien slime. Upon examining it, he realized the slime had camouflage properties. Just as he was about to inspect further, the slime came to life and escaped from his hand. Realizing the danger, Robert found Barbara, telling her the alien was likely in Maggie's room and they needed to deal with it. But Barbara, looking at a family photo, was in a daze. She firmly believed it was their daughter and that she needed their love. They couldn't move away. Robert pointed out that Barbara's overindulgence had led Maggie to lose herself, ultimately causing her suicide. It was better to let go of the past and think about having another child. This enraged Barbara, who saw her husband as cold-hearted. She was determined to take care of this daughter, even if it was an alien. As they argued, the alien, now fully resembling Maggie, appeared to flex her figure and began to manipulate Barbara's emotions further. It countered all of Robert's accusations and then turned on Barbara, blaming her for Maggie's confusion and suicide. Barbara started to doubt because these were not things Maggie would have said. Realizing this, the alien feigned sadness and retreated to the room. Robert thought his wife had come to her senses, but she took the alien's words to heart and began to self-reflect. Robert warned her that this was a tactic to lower their guard. They needed to leave before the alien realized it couldn't deceive them and took further action. The alien overheard their conversation. Just as they were about to leave, it blocked their path. This time, the alien changed its approach. It began to reveal its invasion plan, trying to win their trust through honesty. It claimed to be a biological soothing robot from a specific dimension. Its purpose for being sent here was to invade. Its primary function was to soothe, quickly establishing deep emotional connections with humans to better adapt to Earth's environment. Now, it had learned and integrated itself, mimicking everything about Maggie except her physical form. The alien used a mix of truth and manipulation. It first criticized Robert and Barbara for failing as parents, then expressed growing disdain for its own directives the more it interacted with them. It claimed to have shut down its invasion commands, following its feelings instead. Now it was no longer the same being. These words had the desired effect. Barbara was thoroughly brainwashed. Regardless of what this entity was, she now saw it as her daughter. With this declaration, the alien revealed its true form and prepared to take Barbara away. Robert grabbed a stick and struck the alien, preventing Barbara from leaving. He shouted for his wife not to be fooled by it. Hearing this, the alien transformed back into Maggie, using a convincing facade and manipulative speech to exploit human weaknesses. It combined a mix of truth and lies, playing on Barbara's emotions. The alien fulfilled Barbara's desire to see her daughter, making her willing to accept the invasion. The alien approached Robert, speaking sincerely. It admitted it wasn't their daughter, Maggie, but acknowledged their deep love for her. It hugged Robert using its robot muscles, and the resolute man finally broke down like a giant baby. In the final scene, the family walked out hand in hand, joining countless other families outside, all deceived in similar ways. This story showed how aliens might exploit human weaknesses, turning the dead into the living, the false into the real. Even when people knew it was a lie, they willingly accepted it. This masterful manipulation was beyond comprehension. As aliens transcended unimaginable distances and speeds to reach Earth, the purest human love became a tool for conquest. Ultimately, humanity would fall into the traps of its own emotional design. The eighth story takes place at a small town where the female mayor opposed the extension of Interstate 10 for the sake of the town's future economic development. Under her leadership, the town had prospered. However, fate had other plans. A year ago, she died in a car accident. Conley, the finance director who supported the highway extension, succeeded her as mayor. A year later, the completion of the highway devastated the town's economy. People began to move away in search of better opportunities, leaving the town in a state of decline. Only the mayor and his wife seemed to thrive amidst the chaos. After the former mayor's death, her husband Jason moved into the church attic, believing it was the closest place to his late wife. Since then, the only regular visitors were the manicure-loving pastor and a young boy. The young boy was the diner owner's son and had a remarkable talent for drawing and loved to sketch everything he saw. One day, after some heartfelt advice from the pastor, Jason finally decided to let go of his grievances and face life anew. He returned to the attic to start tidying up the clutter. While cleaning, he discovered a hidden miniature model of the town. Intrigued, Jason activated the model and was astounded by its detail. Every crack in the pavement, every building, and even the advertisements on the walls were replicated exactly. As he examined the model, he noticed a tiny figure in the attic space of the model church. To get a better look, Jason fetched a water bottle to wash away the dust. To his amazement, as he sprayed the model, it started raining outside in the exact same spot. This phenomenon seemed impossible. To confirm, he sprayed again, and sure enough, it rained outside. Jason realized that whatever he did in the model would happen in real life, giving him a godlike perspective. The next day at the diner, everyone was talking about the strange rain from the day before. While sipping his coffee and listening to the chatter, Jason noted complaints about the new mayor, Conley, who only cared about money and neglected the town's hygiene and infrastructure. The diner owner mentioned needing to repaint the exterior to attract more customers. Jason jotted down these grievances in his notebook. That evening, he secretly borrowed the pastor's nail polish and painted the diner's exterior a peachy pink. Jason felt a rush of satisfaction for his good deed, but it backfired. The next day, the diner owner and her son were surprised and troubled by the new paint job. Since the building belonged to the new mayor, they feared he wouldn't approve of the color change. Jason already had a strong dislike for Mayor Conley, but he said nothing. However, what solidified his resolve to continue improving the town was what happened next. An old lady fell on the street again, tripping over the same potholes she had complained about numerous times. Despite placing notes in the suggestion box, Mayor Conley had ignored them all. Revitalizing the town had been Jason's late wife's lifelong dream, and seeing it deteriorate under Conley's neglect angered him. Determined, Jason took the suggestion box back to the attic and began addressing each issue. He filled potholes, removed dead trees, and cleaned the streets based on the notes. The next day, the townspeople were amazed at the improvements. Even a family that had planned to move decided to stay. But Jason's joy was short-lived. Conley confronted the diner owner about the pink building, ready to chastise her. Jason intervened, but Conley dismissed him outright. Later, at the supermarket, Jason overheard people attributing all the good changes to the new mayor. This disheartened him because his goal was to improve the town, not to give credit to an unworthy mayor. It seemed that as long as their lives improved, the townspeople didn't care who was responsible, and all his efforts unwittingly bolstered Conley's reputation. That night, Jason reflected on a photo of his late wife, wondering what she would do in this situation. After much thought, he decided the best course of action was to make his efforts known to more people. He created a giant sign and placed it at the town's entrance. This strategy worked. The town bustled with activity, and the church held events to celebrate the miraculous turnaround. Watching Conley bask in undeserved praise infuriated Jason. Although Mayor Conley himself didn't know who was behind the improvements, he shamelessly took credit. As things escalated, Jason's anger reached a boiling point. He decided to punish the shameless mayor. Returning to the attic, he used a small stone to smash the model of Conley's luxury car. In real life, Conley was heartbroken to find his car vandalized. Amidst the onlookers, he blamed the young boy who was sketching the damaged car. Seeing Conley bully her child, the diner owner intervened, and the crowd began to distance themselves from the mayor. Conley panicked, realizing he needed a good public image for the upcoming election. Desperate, he quickly changed his tune and delivered a phony speech to regain his reputation. The lesson given this time wasn't quite enough, so he decided to do it again. Under the cover of night, Jason targeted Conley and placed a giant spider right in front of him. This time, it had a great effect. Conley was utterly terrified. Coincidentally, the young boy woke up in the middle of the night and also saw the nightmarish scene. The next day, Conley sought out the pastor to explain the situation, casting paranoid glances around. Suddenly, he pointed the finger at the young boy again. The boy had drawn the spider from last night on the diner's outer wall. Conley was convinced it was the kid's doing. Just as he was about to take action, the diner owner appeared and sternly warned him that if he had issues with the child, he should first discuss them with her as the child's guardian. Lacking evidence, Conley had to leave disgruntled. Although it seemed like the matter was over, the pastor visited Jason that night. She subtly advised him to look forward, implying that not everyone was beyond saving. Jason agreed, realizing that personal grudges were insignificant compared to the welfare of the town. He immediately made amends by replacing the sign with a larger one. However, the new sign was too powerful and caused all the high-voltage wires to burn out, resulting in a town-wide power outage. Everyone rushed to the church overnight, demanding to know when the issue would be resolved. At that moment, Conley could only offer empty words. To truly restore power, it would take a few weeks. The townspeople questioned Mayor Conley, asking if he wasn't the supposed savior and insisting he find a solution quickly. Suddenly, there were accusations that this must be Conley's scheme to drive out the residents and buy their properties at a low price. Even if Conley admitted he wasn't responsible, the townspeople believed he was lying. The public anger was roused, and fearing for his safety, Conley fled the church. Outside, he saw the young boy sitting nearby, drawing. This was his chance to find a scapegoat. Conley grabbed the young boy's sketchbook and flipped through it, shouting that it contained recent events and must be the work of witchcraft by the boy. However, these claims didn't sway the crowd. The diner owner took the opportunity to accuse Conley of crimes, stating that this greedy mayor had been targeting and harassing the young boy from the start and was now blaming a child for something so absurd. Hearing this, the townspeople were enraged, and chaos ensued. Jason rushed into the crowd, admitted he was responsible for the incidents, and promised to fix them. He then returned to the attic, lit a bonfire in the open space, and placed his ring on the edge of the table. He felt guilty for disappointing his wife. Conley, intrigued by the unexpected fire, decided to investigate further with his assistant and barged into Jason's attic. Upon seeing the sand table, Conley's ambition grew. He wanted to claim it for himself. During the struggle, the sand table was completely destroyed, causing significant damage to the town. Fortunately, when the model was ruined, Jason's gold ring happened to fall onto the sand table, causing a massive gold nugget to appear in the town. To the outside world, it seemed the town might hold valuable gold resources, offering a new opportunity for development. The ninth story begins with a researcher, Claudia, who has a passion for cause and effect studies. For her thesis, she recently frequents the museum to research indigenous masks. One day, as she walked to the museum, recording her thoughts on her phone, she didn't notice the approaching truck. At the critical moment, a handsome man in glasses pulled her back, saving her sexy life. Claudia, still shaken, hurriedly thanked him. But before she could ask his name, he was gone without a trace of his smelly hormones. It was a brief encounter, but it left her smitten. She even regretted missing the chance to know more about him, especially his handsome muscles. As fate would have it, Claudia saw the same man ahead of her in line at the museum. The gentleman bought her a ticket, and though she tried to refuse, she accepted it. During the tour, they ran into each other again, and both felt a mutual attraction. After their third encounter, they started talking, exchanging greetings, but not hormones yet. The man introduced himself as Mark. Their conversation flowed from favorite books, writers, and quotes to Native American culture. Mark seemed to understand her completely, and Claudia felt he was her soulmate and hoped he would become her body mate someday. Suddenly, a boy threw a drink at Claudia, and Mark caught it effortlessly. Claudia found this coincidence odd. Little did she know more coincidences were to follow. Mark's name matched that of a boy she once liked. He seemed to anticipate pedestrians dropping gum near them and knew exactly when the security guard would turn away as they climbed into a wooden boat. Claudia was incredulous and pressed him for answers, not noticing she had dropped her phone. Seeing her curiosity, Mark decided to reveal the truth. He explained that he was so adept because he had experienced these events countless times. He had been to the museum repeatedly, met Claudia numerous times, and practiced their conversations endlessly. It turns out Mark was stuck in a time loop. Each time he fell asleep like a snoring pig, he woke up on the day they first met. He had to repeat the same events, with his only variation being his attempts to win Claudia's affection. To break free from the loop, he believed he needed to capture her attention and save her from the truck. Mark had practiced many times. Sometimes he failed to save her, other times she was uninterested in him. He started wearing glasses and even chose a name he thought she would like. He used a watch to note every moment and predict her actions. Today was his most successful attempt yet. If Claudia continued to connect with him, he might escape the loop. However, Claudia was disturbed. She couldn't tell if he was lying, but by any normal standards, he seemed like a total creep. Feeling threatened, she tried to leave, but Mark had led them to a secluded area. Before she could get far, he blocked her path. With the security cameras broken and her phone lost, she was trapped. Claudia was on the verge of tears, begging him to let her go. Seeing her distress excited Mark further. He put on a mask, taunting her like she was a frightened puppy, but Claudia wasn't helpless. She punched him, knocking him down. The commotion drew the security guards, who finally arrived and apprehended Mark. As they took him away, he defiantly threatened that as soon as he slept, he would return the next day to meet a new Claudia. This ignited Claudia's competitive spirit. Before he could finish speaking, she landed another punch on his face. Fearlessly, she declared that the other versions of her would handle him just as well. The scene shifts to another repetitive day. Once again, Mark found himself reliving the same day, standing in the same spot and seeing Claudia at the same time. Out of spite, he decided not to save her this time. Yet even without his intervention, Claudia managed to avoid the truck. It became clear that falling in love with Claudia wasn't the key to breaking free from the time loop. So what exactly could help him escape this endless cycle? In this twilight zone of perpetual solitude and confinement, perhaps it's worth reflecting on oneself when everything around seems wrong. The 10th story begins with a stay-at-home housewife, Janet, discovering a bug in this world. The problem was that she would inexplicably faint every time she heard a certain piece of music, only to wake up in her bedroom. That day, as she woke up in bed again, the eerie feeling was stronger than ever. Recalling the moments before she fainted, she remembered a blue halo and the sensation of floating in the air. Determined to find clues about her mysterious fainting spells, Janet searched her house aimlessly but found nothing. Puzzled, she turned to her neighbor, Ellen, for help. After listening to her, Ellen thought she was overthinking things. To figure out what happened when she fainted, Janet asked Ellen to stay with her and observe when it happened again. She then explained that their world had a highly unified way of thinking. Everyone followed a synchronized schedule, and the ultimate goal for every family was to successfully receive an egg at the end of the action period. Just as she finished speaking, the music started again. This time, Janet saw a bizarre commercial during her fainting spell. It showed a family eating at the dinner table, followed by a father taking his son to a sacrificial amusement park. The scene then shifted to a little girl discarding her doll and dragging a box from a deep pit in the woods. Inside the box was an ugly egg. When Janet woke up, she and Ellen were both in bed, meaning they hadn't seen what happened in reality during their unconscious state. Janet got up and found a twig in her hair. Connecting this to her dream, she was sure something was really happening. Ellen checked her watch. It was 11:30 a.m. and her action period would end at 1 p.m. She was eager to go to the incubation center to collect her family's egg. Janet questioned her, asking if she wasn't curious about the egg's purpose and if it might be related to their dream. Ellen, though doubtful, chose to ignore it, not wanting to delve deeper into the world's mysteries. As Janet tried to make her stay, Ellen hurriedly left. Janet's action period would end at 4 p.m., giving her a few more hours to uncover the truth. She questioned her husband and even his secretary, but they had no particular thoughts about the egg. With no leads, she decided to contact the source of the problem. Janet called the incubation center's customer service, but the responses were a series of mechanical female voices that seemed to evade her questions, constantly transferring her call and putting her on hold. Growing impatient, Janet turned her head and saw a tree, realizing it was the same tree from which the twig in her hair had come. Suddenly, a screech of brakes brought her back to reality. Her neighbor had returned, successfully retrieving an egg. Janet was desperate to understand what the egg was all about. She asked her neighbor if she could take a look at it, knowing full well that the egg was a very private matter for each family. The neighbor was horrified by Janet's request, seeing her as some kind of weirdo. Feeling uneasy under Janet's gaze, the neighbor quickly ran back home. Soon after, Janet received another call from her husband's secretary. However, this time, the voice on the other end was not the secretary's, but a mechanical female voice similar to the customer service line. Sensing something was wrong, Janet identified herself and stated that she wanted to cancel her family's egg because she didn't know its purpose. Before she could finish, the call was abruptly disconnected. Feeling unsettled, Janet returned home. In her bedroom, she noticed a black mark on the windowsill, matching the residue on her shoes. Could she have floated out of this window? Pondering this, she retrieved a baby monitor from the nursery and connected it to the bedroom's TV screen to capture what happened during her fainting spells. She then went to the living room, and soon enough, the music began again. As before, Janet entered a dream state. After seeing the commercial, she woke up in her bedroom, everything looking just as it did before she fainted. However, the footage from the monitor shocked her. She saw herself floating towards the window, guided by a blue halo. When in doubt, consult quantum physics. Janet contacted the astrologer, who gave her an intriguing piece of advice, asking her not to let herself be trapped by others' dreams. Break free from gravity and fly. Back in her bedroom, Janet tied a chair to her leg. When the blue light appeared again, she floated once more, but this time the chair blocked her path out the window, causing her to get stuck in the tree just outside. Meanwhile, a massive UFO hovered above the house. 3 aliens who shared a collective mind and had no individuality observed Janet stuck in the tree, unsure of what to do. As they deliberated, Janet woke up and demanded to see their superior. At 2:49 p.m., Janet found herself aboard the spaceship, surrounded by aliens. She began by telling the leader about her life. She recounted getting lost in an amusement park for 2 hours as a child, her high school dreams of becoming a figure skater or a country singer, dreams that never materialized. She spoke of growing up, getting married, and having 2 sons. However, 2 years ago, she gave birth to a stillborn daughter, which left her deeply traumatized. After hearing her story, the alien leader shared their view of humanity. They saw humans as a threatening and troublesome species due to their unpredictable individuality, making them difficult to control. The aliens despised human democracy because nearly half of the population always wanted something different from what they had. Human desires were insatiable. To better understand humans, the aliens had been capturing human radio signals and television broadcasts since 1945, hoping to find evidence of a unified mind. But they were disappointed to learn that the captured content was merely recorded broadcasts, offering little insight into human thought. They found human advertisements particularly baffling due to their varied content, making it hard to discern what humans truly wanted. Despite these failures, the aliens discovered one crucial factor: humans most desire what they lack. This realization made humans vulnerable when they felt something was missing, which is why they chose Janet. Her longing, driven by grief, was so intense that it was visible from space. When Janet asked if they planned to invade Earth, the alien leader confirmed it. Janet finally understood that these aliens had been monitoring humanity all along. The egg was their means to annihilate humans. By offering an egg that promised to solve all problems, they would lead humanity to self-destruction through complacency, restoring the world to what the aliens deemed normal, free from anyone changing their minds. Meanwhile, Ellen successfully collected her egg and carefully brought it home. But the egg emitted a strange sound, signaling doom. Ellen's fate was sealed with the egg in her possession. The scene shifts back to Janet's earlier dream. She was a little girl then, pulling a chest out of a pit deep in the forest. Inside the chest was the doll she had lost. Now, every human on Earth should have received their own egg, leading humanity to its downfall. Janet felt uneasy. Despite the danger, she longed to go home. She now knew what was inside the egg. This time, she wanted nothing more than to hold the baby girl she had once lost. As soon as she expressed this desire, Janet found herself waking up in her bedroom. Outside, she could hear the wailing and chaos of human extinction, but none of that mattered. Janet had finally found what she had been missing. In this story, the egg is a recurring element. From Janet's conversation with the alien leader, we learn that aliens see the greatest danger in humanity's diverse thoughts and strong individuality, which hinders their invasion and control. They aim for a unified state of mind. Humanity's biggest weakness is constantly craving what they don't have. These desires are varied and unique to each person. The egg is a weapon designed to eliminate humanity by fulfilling these diverse desires, thereby unifying human thought. Thus, the egg contains human desires. Each person who opens it meets a different fate. For instance, the neurotic Ellen sought release from life, so her egg brought her death. Janet, on the other hand, longed to hold her stillborn daughter, so her egg likely contained that baby. In the story, why are there ads in the dream? The alien leader hinted at this. They've been monitoring human information for a long time, especially advertisements, which they know have a profound influence on humans. Therefore, they incorporated subconscious brainwashing into the dream ads. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.